righty. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. Guys, this is the very first episode of me reacting to every single Alex O'Connor video on the internet. Give me the best emoji in the chat. Give me the best emoji to represent Alex O'Connor that you have. I want something kind of suave, something debonair, you know? He's a very sophisticated guy, you know? So give me the best emoji in the chat that represents Alex O'Connor. I am very excited to do this. I have been wanting to do this for about 3 months. I reached out to Alex O'Connor 3 months ago, and I heard back from his agent, and basically he was really busy at the time, and didn't really work out to get him on the podcast. I also, I'm not a big YouTuber, so I figured there's not a lot of incentive for him to come on the podcast as a guest. So what can I do? Well, I can watch every single one of his videos and share a viral video discussing this experience, and maybe, just maybe, he'll come on the podcast. We'll see. But I wanted to break down, a medal. I see that gold medal right there. Let me pull up the chat here so y'all can see everything that's going on. I have numbers. Okay. So for you guys who are math people, I crunched the numbers of what this experience will look like. I'm hoping to do this in a year. So every single week I'm going to be live streaming this reaction. And hopefully in 1 year from now, I will be done this entire process. I won't be broadcasting every single episode. I will be doing that in my own time. But weekly I will be broadcasting some of the episodes, and so you guys can kind of join on the journey as I do it that way. But here are some of the numbers. So the crazy thing about this is you can see right here 376 videos. So that's how many just videos that he has on his main channel. And it's from his first video is guitar solo behind my head. And the latest video that he's recently uploaded with Dan McClellan is there are multiple gods in the Bible. Now, if I were to just straight up sit down and watch every single one of these videos, it would take 10 days, 21 hours, 22 minutes, and 24 seconds. That's a long time. That's approximately 261 hours of content. Now, I've done some of this on my own already. So far, I have watched 86 videos on my own. And I've watched from this very first video, the guitar solo behind my head, all the way through something you need to know about an interview with Lloyd Evans. Lloyd Evans is someone who speaks about the Jehovah's Witness church. So that's where we're at. I've also watched some of the latest ones as well. I see here in the chat, he may not have even seen your email. He may be delegating that to someone else. Yes. No. Yeah. My agent was, his agent was the one that responded to me. So yeah, he did not respond that to me, directly. So yeah, maybe he didn't even see the email. Yeah, no, that's a good point. So, but yeah, my main thing, so far is I've done 86 videos, but I mean, that's just scratching the surface, like 376 videos and counting, right? So I estimated he posts about 47 hours of content every 6 months. So with that in mind, when I first started, it would have been 333 hours, approximately 333 hours. And if I wanted to do that in a year, that would be about 7 hours of content every single week. So those are just kind of some of the numbers that you guys can be kind of keeping in your head. Like, man, that is a lot of stuff. And it's a big task, but it's a task that I'm very excited about. I'm excited that you guys get to join in on this process with me. For those who are maybe like worried, like, oh no, we don't get to see the first episode with you. I recorded that. So I've recorded my reaction to that first episode, those first few episodes and everything. So that's already like recorded and done. So that'll be in the final video that I do. But I won't be doing that as a live broadcast. I mean, maybe I can if we really want to. If you guys really want to see that, let me know in the chat, and we can just do it. They're shorter videos at the front, so it's not like a big deal if we do that or not. But the way this is going to work is we will watch, and for copyright reasons, I have to regularly be like pausing, adding in commentary, things of that sort. I can't just like play the video straight up because then it might get taken down for copyright reasons. So the goal will be to watch the video. I'll pause it, add some commentary. You guys can comment below and be like, oh, this is interesting. This was a cool quote, things like that. And we can just like in this document over here. So in this document, I have tons of area for notes. I'll put your emojis here, but I have tons of areas for notes, so we can kind of note down some of the cool moments, some of the cool quotes from each video. We can get wild, however we wanna do this, and we can just share these sort of moments. And then at the end, once we finish the video, and we'll be doing multiple videos today, but once we finish the video, I want to leave a unique comment. And so y'all can help me come up with that comment as well. We can maybe discuss some of the key moments. We can discuss some of the interesting things that we found. You can comment there, and I'll include that into the comment so that we can all be a part of adding the unique comment. And then I have this, where is it? I have a little preempt right here. So this is just a little template. So at the beginning of every single comment, I'll have that little thing right there. So yeah, I am so pumped for this, guys. Guys, welcome in, everybody. Thank you for the likes. If you have not already, give this live stream a like and spam the hearts. It really helps this get seen by more and more people. This is going to be a big achievement. It's a very big goal to watch every single Alex O'Connor video. So I need you guys' help. This is going to be super huge. So I really, really appreciate all the love. I appreciate all that you guys are doing. For anyone who's just tuning in, I pretty much just went through all the numbers. So 376 videos. That's how many videos he has. It would take about 10 days, 21 hours, 22 minutes, and 24 seconds to get through all of it. That's approximately 261 hours of content. We're not doing that all in one sitting. Hell no, that'd be insane. But we are going to do that eventually, hopefully within a year from now. So yeah, feel free to let me know. Do you have any questions? I mentioned earlier emojis. So if you have an emoji that represents Alex O'Connor, put that in the chat. What are the best emojis to represent Alex O'Connor? We got a gold medal already, but if you got another one, like share it there. I'm thinking, I see popcorn. There was a popcorn emoji earlier, but yeah, this is very exciting stuff. So the very first episode that we will be reacting to is about Richard Dawkins. So this episode discusses the God delusion, and it's actually titled The Dawkins Delusion. So for those who maybe are unfamiliar with the God delusion, it is one of the episodes it's one of Dawkins' books. Oh, I see a goat. Yep, Alex O'Connor, he's the goat. Thank you, Sonny. And the interesting thing about the Dawkins, or not Dawkins delusion, the God delusion, is that it was one of the biggest sort of critiques of Christianity at the time. And it is not really the best critique of Christianity, if I'm being honest. There's quite a few sort of, logical errors, quite a few things in it that I don't think are quite right. And he is going to be actually responding and reacting to some of the things that Richard Dawkins didn't quite get correct in his book. And so that's hence why it's titled The Dawkins Delusion. After that, we're going to get to the thumbnail, right? We're going to get to the thumbnail of the video. I have it pulled up right here. Alex O'Connor says, homosexuality is not moral, and here's why. That's pretty crazy, coming out of Alex O'Connor's very own voice. Now, this is probably satirical. I don't think this is his true view. I think he's being satirical here, but we'll see. We'll have to see what the video is. But without further ado, I say we kick things off with the very first episode, The Dawkins Delusion. Are you guys ready? Guys, I need to see some more emojis. I saw a donkey earlier, but if you got an emoji that represents Alex O'Connor, put it in the chat. Put it in the chat. Feel free to think hard. All right. Are you guys ready for this? I don't think I'm ready. All right, I got it unmuted. Now we're ready. Now we're ready to go. The first one, here we go.
If you want to build an app and have no idea how to code or where to start,
we got an ad. All right, here we go. All right, here we go.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Alex, and if you follow me on Goodreads, then you'll know that I recently picked up a book by Alistair and Joanna McGrath entitled The Dawkins Delusion. No prizes for guessing what it's about. Now, you may have heard of this book, you may have actually read it yourself. It's not very long and attempts effectively to rebut the God delusion. Now, after closing its final page, I've been just desperate to share it with you for reasons that will hopefully become apparent, and so have decided to make this somewhat of a video review. Now, I have a small library of apologetic books, which I...
Let me know in the chat. Have you guys ever read The God Delusion? I read it a few years back, and it's a pretty good book. Definitely a lot of emotional kind of angst to it. I didn't read it. I had the audiobook. But yeah, let me know in the chat. Have you seen The God Delusion?
I used to familiarize myself with the best theistic arguments and to challenge myself and inspire responses. But I have to say, I shan't be adding this book to its ranks. I'm not a Dawkinsian in any sense of the word. I appreciate Dawkins' writings, and I think he's a wonderful communicator. But outside of teleological discussions, I don't think he's the greatest source of theological wisdom, to put it mildly. Notwithstanding, I still think that this book is fatally flawed in a number of ways, and I'd like to go through some of them with you. The orange stickers indicate bits that I disagree with. So the purpose of this book is to respond to what the McGraths see as the most important parts of the God delusion, and to offer a defense of both the existence and utility of God. Unfortunately, they seem to have misunderstood a number of scientific and moral concepts, and the book also contains some unambiguous, flat-out falsities. A telling example of the first of these can be found on page 9. Dawkins is quoted here responding to the cosmological argument that everything needs a cause. He mentions the idea that if everything needs a cause, then any original first cause would itself need a cause, resulting in an infinite regress of causation that goes back forever. Now, Dawkins criticizes theologians who exempt God from this infinite regress of causes, claiming that any being that could end this regress of first mover would itself require an explanation, effectively what caused the first cause. Now, this is quite an elementary criticism of theism, to which there are a number of compelling responses, such as the Kalam cosmological argument, for instance. But bizarrely, the McGraths completely neglect to bring any of them up, and instead just wag their finger at theoretical physics, for some reason, as if that...
So for anyone who is unfamiliar, the Kalam cosmological argument is an argument mostly put together by William Lane Craig, but a lot of people have put together similar arguments to it. And it has to do with the idea that everything that begins to exist has a cause. So it's not saying that everything causally has to have a cause, right? Because then you would get to God, and then you would ask the question, well, then what caused God to exist? But the Kalam cosmological argument makes a slightly different argument, which is everything that begins to exist. So if it has a beginning, then it has a cause. And so that clearly leaves God out because God is eternal. And so since God is eternal, he doesn't begin to exist. And so he can be the thing that causes everything. So that's how theists can respond to the idea of causality. So we'll see what Alex has to say about the rest of this.
Proves anything. Here's the quote. However, it needs to be pointed out here that the holy grail of the natural sciences is the quest for the grand unified theory, the theory of everything. Why is such a theory regarded as being so important? Because it can explain everything without itself requiring or demanding an explanation. The explanatory buck stops right there. There is no infinite regress in the quest for explanation. If Dawkins' brash and simplistic arguments carried weight, this great scientific quest could be dismissed with a seemingly profound yet in fact trivial question. What explains the explainer? Now, aside from the fact that Dawkins never actually mentions grand unification in the God Delusion, it's immediately clear from the McGrath's inability to distinguish between grand unified theory and the theory of everything, which are not in fact the same thing, that they haven't sufficiently read up on even what they are. Now, you'd think that they had, given that they include a note here recommending 2 relevant books on the subject, but they seem even to have misunderstood those as well. Now, one of the books mentioned is Brian Greene's The Elegant Universe, for which I can thank Leanne for sending to me. So given that this is the book that's explicitly recommended by the McGraths to back up the point they're making, let's take a look, shall we? So this is from page 366, where Greene has just been talking about string theory. He says, in the context of string/M theory, our cosmological understanding is, at present, just too primitive to determine whether our candidate theory of everything truly lives up to its name and determines its own cosmological initial conditions, thereby elevating them to the status of physical law. This is a prime question for future research. Here we witness the kind of humility that is characteristic of the scientific process. It would be lovely if we could unify electromagnetism, gravity, and the strong and weak nuclear forces into this theory of everything. But we can't even claim that this is possible until we prove it so. Dawkins wasn't saying that there can't be some kind of end to a causal regression. He just thinks that we shouldn't presumptuously reserve this position for God. The quote used by the McGraths to present Dawkins' view here is not presented in its entirety in the book, but here's the full quote, and this is from page 77. All 3 of Aquinas' cosmological arguments rely upon the idea of a regress and invoke God to terminate it. They make the entirely unwarranted assumption that God himself is immune to the regress. Even if we allow the dubious luxury of arbitrarily conjuring up a terminator to an infinite regress and giving it a name simply because we need one, there is absolutely no reason to endow this terminator with any of the properties normally ascribed to God. Omnipotence, omniscience, goodness, creativity of design, blah blah blah. There is a world of difference between hypothesizing a grand theory of everything and then attempting to prove it theoretically and unreservedly admitting that such a theory may very possibly not exist at all, and hypothesizing a God to end an infinite regress for the sake of philosophical convenience. But this book isn't just wrong in its trivial scientific analogies. There are a number of other sections with glaring errors in them too, one of which is the section dedicated to rebutting the claim that religion is evil. Now, the most outrageously misleading of these can be found on page 58, where the McGraths criticise Dawkins for ignoring a number of so-called forgiving and compassionate injunctions of the Old Testament, whilst biasly focusing on the negative ones instead. Of course...
So that's a really interesting idea there. So there was kind of a lot that was thrown out there, and I think the best explanation I've had of what is the theory of everything. The theory of everything isn't like 42, you know, like that's kind of the joke answer that you'll hear. I forget what movie that's from. Comment below if you remember what movie that's from. But yeah, basically the idea of the theory of everything is this concept of the physics of the quantum realm don't quite add up with the physics that we see in relativity. So like the regular, just sort of larger sized realm, you know, the cosmos. And so because these two things aren't quite adding up, right? They're not really making sense at all. The main thing that physicists are trying to figure out, and this is what string theory tries to do. If string theory is true, then it would be an explanation for the theory of everything. It tries to make quantum physics and what we have observed according to the data of quantum physics add up with the data of the cosmos. And so basically what this person, I guess, is trying to say is that God is the explanation of the theory of everything. That's not really much of an explanation, because there's still a lot of things that don't quite add up. We need science that helps us connect the discourse between quantum mechanics and relativity. So that's the main question that's at stake in that specific arena.
The first problem with this is that the existence of benign verses in the Bible do not in any way discount the existence of violent and harmful ones. I don't care if the Bible says love thy neighbour if that comes with the caveat of not including homosexuals, for example. But that aside, astonishingly, one of the specific examples of these good verses that the McGraths include here is just factually wrong. According to the McGraths, Dawkins ignores Old Testament material that, quote, prohibits slavery, with Leviticus 25 given as the evidence. Here we have perhaps the most impressively ignorant misrepresentation of the Bible I've ever seen, and this is particularly ironic given that this is what the McGraths accused Dawkins of doing in the very same chapter.
Guys, he just said the most. Shoot, I'm going to misquote him. But he said the most misrepresented part of the Bible. That's quite the claim right there. We'll see if it's true.
The source of the confusion here seems to be Leviticus chapter 25 verse 42, which states, "Because the Israelites are my servants, whom I brought out of Egypt, they must not be sold as slaves. Do not rule over them ruthlessly, but fear your God." Now at first glance, you may feel this corroborates the McGrath's report. Not a bit of it. This verse doesn't outlaw slavery as they claim it does. It only prohibits the enslavement of Israelites, God's chosen people. Foreigners, on the other hand, are fair game. Here's literally the next verse. "Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around."
I'm going to move myself real quick. Give me just 1 second. All right, we're good.
"Around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and can make them slaves for life." So it seems that the McGraths, in trying to present the best of what the Old Testament can offer and subsequently presenting the absolute worst, have made my point for me. Now these are just a few examples among a litany of errors and flaws, so I'll try to take you through a few more as quickly as possible. Nearer the end of the book, on page 61, the McGraths claim that fasting, giving up all food because one's religion tells them to, is absolutely normal behaviour because some people cut down on sugar and fat in order to improve their fitness for non-religious reasons. I'm not making this up. On the page before that, the claim is made that spirituality should be included as a part of healthcare, given that it, quote, matters so much to patients, as if we should base healthcare on what a patient thinks they need rather than what a medical professional thinks they need. If you've seen my videos in the past, then you might know that I've spoken about Bertrand Russell's celestial teapot analogy before. Now, Russell was responding to the claim that you can't prove that God doesn't exist by saying that you also can't prove that there isn't a teapot orbiting the sun in space, yet this doesn't mean one should believe that there is. Now, Dawkins mentions this in The God Delusion, and in chapter 3, the McGraths completely misunderstand the analogy and state that, quote, that's what Dawkins wants his readers to think, that believing in God is on the same level as cosmic teapots. This suggests the most shallow reading of Russell's analogy. On page 48, the McGraths refer to the Soviet Union's, quote, atheistic ideology, equating a disbelief in God with the hatred of religion. On page 22, they claim that Einstein used religious imagery in order to, quote, sound Christian. And finally, they claim that the popularity of religion is persuasive of atheism being, quote, a fatally flawed worldview, as if atheism is a worldview, and as if, even if it was, its validity would be based upon the number of its supporters. Look, I'm not trying to defend Dawkins as an infallible atheist hero, but I hope you're now in agreement with me that as far as criticisms go, this isn't a strong one. Now, if you'd like to analyse it for yourself, a link to the book as well as all the other books mentioned in this video will be available in the description. I really would love to hear from anyone who agrees with anything in the Dawkins delusion, so if you do, be sure to leave a comment. In the meantime, I've been Alex O'Connor, or Cosmic Skeptic. You can find me on social media here. I want to thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
Alrighty. Guys, that is the first video. The first video watched. I'm so glad that y'all are here. Thank you for being here. So I found that to be a pretty interesting video. Definitely not the most, educated book in the world. There was a lot of sort of misunderstandings in terms of the science going on, misquoting different parts of the Bible. So not great to see stuff like that happening. It's a little bit sad, but it happens. For now, we have to leave a comment. And there's quite a few comments here. So maybe this will give us some inspiration. What kind of comment should we give for the Dawkins delusion video? If we scroll down here to the very end, we can see all the other comments. The first one is the misreading of the verse on slavery is shocking. How did that get past the editors? And I think one of the comments of that comment it said, "You assume it had editors." So yeah, no, that's a very interesting one. But what stuck out to you guys there? I think the main thing that stuck out to me was sort of how they were using the theory of everything in the thing. So welcome everybody. Welcome to the chat. Content, Alex O'Connor was a bit unorganized, yet still interesting topic. Yeah, I mean, it was a bit everywhere with that last video. But no, definitely very interesting. If you guys saw the thumbnail about his claim about homosexuality, that's actually the next video that we'll be watching. So you guys can check that out. It is satire. So the thumbnail is not. I'm not trying to say that that's what he believes, but in his video, he's satirical and is saying that homosexuality is right or whatever. Very interesting. But yeah, now we have a comment to leave. So I think the way to do this is we can do a poll. What kind of comment do we want to leave? Do we want to leave a funny comment? Or do we want to leave a serious comment? Or do we want to just, wish him a happy day? What kind of comment should we leave? All right, the poll is out. So what kind of comment should we leave on this video? Should we leave something a little bit more funny? Should we leave something that is going to be more informational? Okay, we got one vote for informational. I like this comment here. It says, spoiler, Dawkins exists. So that kind of makes sense because Dawkins, like his book was the God delusion, and this book is the Dawkins delusion. So if God is a delusion, this book critiquing the God delusion is saying that Dawkins himself is a delusion. So I think the person who said that is a bit delusional. All right, we got 3 votes in. Looks like so far, just wishing him a happy day. You guys are too nice. You guys are, we got to get brutal, We got to tear the video apart. We can do that later. That's fine. Wish him a happy day. We got a lot of, I saw a few Canadians in there. I myself, I'm a dual citizen, so I understand the at least the perception of being nice. So Appreciate it. But yeah. It's looking like just wishing him a happy day is the kind of comment that we're looking for. Riley says, I believe in lifting people up. You know what? You're right. I can learn something from you, Riley. I should probably seek after that. No, that's good. All right, so it looks like wishing him a happy day revolves around Exodus 21, 20 through 21, directly demonstrating the violence that God advocated for. Out of genuine curiosity, how do you tackle this issue? Perhaps contextual. So Exodus 21, 20 through 21. So I'm not a Christian, just for anyone who's watching who might be thinking that I am. So I actually would agree with Alex's critique there. I think this is a fair critique. It's a fair problem of evil sort of critique there. We also see it, another one of those happening in 2 Samuel. We see it happening in Joshua. There's a lot of calls to genocide in the Bible. And, it's tough to see. There are different explanations that people give. I think the main one that William Lane Craig gives is the idea of like God's command usurping intuition. So we might have an intuition that basically says like it's wrong to do this, right? I think an Alex O'Connor video with William and Craig, he used a school shooter analogy, and he said, if God told me to go and shoot up a school, terrible thing, definitely against our intuitions, right? But if God commanded that, would that be right? And according to this theory, it would be, if God is truly telling you to do so. And I think the other thing is we can look at the context, we can look at history even. There's a lot of these sort of Canaanite nations, they were definitely doing some wrong things. Like they were sacrificing children to gods on altars. They were, doing some really, really messed up things. And so it shows that, this is maybe God's judgment going on, similar to what we might say about the flood, how that is sort of God's judgment going on. But I would agree more with Alex's assessment. I think this is a piece of ancient literature that at the time they would have seen as good. I also think there's some hyperbole going on, right? There's reference to these other nations in other parts of the Bible, showing that they weren't wiped out entirely as the Bible said they did. And so to me, it doesn't excuse it. I'm not saying that's an excuse, but what I am saying is I think there's some hyperbole, and I think there's a lot of things to be discussed and said when it comes to genocide in the Bible. But at the end of the day, I would agree with Alex. I don't think that is... I think that's an issue. I would say that's a pretty big issue in the Bible. So, yeah, great comment. Thank you. Who was that? No Name. Thank you, No Name. Appreciate you, bro. Appreciate you. All right, so you guys want to be nice today, so we're gonna go over to our handy dandy little comment template. I gotta add this at the beginning of every comment, and we're gonna put the comment here, and I'm going to say, Alex, you had some nice hair in this video. Great job. Boom. I was watching one of his videos a few days ago, and his hair was pretty wild. It looked like he had some bedhead. No judgment. I have bedhead sometimes. I used to actually have long hair. I had a huge mullet down to my shoulders, and it was pretty wild times. So totally get the bad hair day. But guys, that is our first video down. Come on now, can we get some claps in the chat? you guys stuck around for the very first video. I'm going to go back now, and we are going to now watch the video from the thumbnail. Did Alex O'Connor say that homosexuality is immoral? He kind of does. He kind of does. And we will see that here in a moment. So the video we just watched was Dawkins' delusion. The next one, homosexuality is not moral. And here's why. Dum, 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 dum. Dum, dum, dum. All right, you guys ready? What are your predictions? Do you actually think he believes that? Do you think that's true? Do you think that's true? Maybe. Here we go.
Google Fiber has arrived in Omaha.
Gotta love ads. Gotta love ads. Gotta love ads. All right. Here we go. Here we go.
This video is not anti-homosexuality. The video title probably doesn't mean what you think it means. I'm only making this disclaimer because I know that YouTube is just full of people who love to judge videos with...
Dang it. Dang it. He's not anti-homosexual. That's not a dang it. That's a good thing. Good for him. Good for him. I just wanted to try to expose him. Man's trying to expose the guy. Just kidding. All right, here we go.
Without actually watching them. So before you all run to the dislike bar, bear in mind that this video is a bit closer to being pro-homosexuality, but isn't really that either. It's more just like, I don't care about anybody's homosexuality, and neither should you, and so none of us should be passing judgment, okay? So please actually watch the video, thanking you kindly. Good morning, everybody. My name is Alex, and seeing as Australia...
What are your thoughts? I'm thinking we leave a hate comment, right? Right? Comment below. We'll see.
Australia is currently in the midst of a voluntary survey to find out if the public think that loving the wrong person is a crime unworthy of state recognition. I can't think of a better time to be discussing the topic I'd like to address today. I want to consider the following question. Is homosexuality moral? The answer? No. Wait, let me clarify that. When I say no, that homosexuality is not moral, I don't at all mean to say that it's immoral. Rather, what I want to imply is that the question as a whole is erroneous. As soon as this so-called debate is brought up, as soon as somebody poses the question about homosexuality in this manner of morality, they've already committed a grave fallacy. The mistake being made here is an ungrounded assumption that homosexuality as a topic, or an act, or an orientation, falls within what I call the moral sphere, that is, things that can be viewed and judged in the context of morality. Everything we ever do falls within one of two categories. It either falls within the moral sphere, or it falls within the amoral sphere, that is, not in the moral sphere. My goal here is to describe the difference between these two spheres and explain which one is home to homosexuality. My aim is to show you that no, homosexuality is not inherently moral, but it isn't immoral either. It's got absolutely nothing to do with morality, and you therefore have no right to morally judge people for it. In other words, I want to show you why even considering whether someone is being moral or not by simply being a homosexual is a ridiculous idea. I'm proposing a...
This is crazy. Guys, this is absolutely crazy, and I'll explain this in a second. Alex currently, this is several years old, this is 7 years old. Alex currently is an emotivist, and what that means is that he believes that morality is simply just emotionally driven. So there is no like objective morality, but morality is sort of this emotional sort of, yay, I like this, or no, I don't like this, right? That's what he believes morality to be today. And so to see him to say that things can be amoral is basically showing that he's definitely not an emotivist at this point in his career, because for something to be amoral is to say that there's no emotional attachment to it. But emotivism leads you to realizing that, in a sense, everything is emotionally driven, and in a sense, everything is emotional and moral. So like even the claim that like dolphins exist, right? We believe that dolphins exist. They're real things ontologically. You can't deny it, right? If I were to go to you and say, I don't think dolphins exist, you would maybe defend that perspective, right? But the reason you would defend it, according to emotivism, deep down, is actually because you have an emotional attachment to the idea of being right. So you have an emotional attachment to believing that dolphins exist. And if that is incorrect, well, then you're mad, you're frustrated, and you view the assessment that you're wrong, right? The assessment that you are incorrect, you view that emotionally as boo or bad. And so that's kind of the perspective of an emotivist. So here it shows that he's clearly not an emotivist. He has a very different perspective. So it's interesting. I'd be very curious as to what Alex would have to say about this old video. But yeah, it's very, very interesting. I think I saw something in the chat over here. Mean Soak saying mean soak things. Yes. I won't say that on stream, but Mean Soak, you're hilarious. I love you, bro. I love you, bro. All right, let's get back to it.
Simple criteria by which you can judge whether or not an action falls within this moral sphere and can be judged in a moral context. If something doesn't fall within this category, then we can't view it in terms of morality and we can't judge people for it. Now, there are two boxes that must be checked in order to say that something does fall within the moral sphere. The first of these is that there must be a conscious agent committing the action, and the second is that the action must have some effect on human well-being. Now, as a quick aside, as I'll need to mention this briefly, I've said before that I disagree with Sam Harris about morality. I don't believe that morality is objective or can be objective, because to believe this is to assume that well-being is intrinsically a good thing. However, this doesn't matter in this instance, because there is something that we can all agree on here, that our sense of morality is based upon well-being. The only difference is that I think this is a subjective assumption we make because of our evolutionary tendencies, whereas Dr. Harris thinks that morality is by definition based on well-being. I've discussed this at length before with Rationality Rules, a link is in the description. Still, we can see that whether we believe in God or not, and whether we believe morality is objective or not, we can all agree that morality is based upon the well-being of living creatures. Again, if you need convincing of this, watch the video in the description. Having said all this, we can...
All right, so that's a good qualifier. Basically, if you believe in objective morality or subjective morality, this conversation still applies. But that doesn't quite, and this is the other thing, when philosophers talk about morality, they don't really view it in terms of objective versus subjective, mainly because morality is ultimately from humans, no matter what. Even if you think it's like intricately woven and given to you by God, it's human-centered, right? And so there's no such thing as a moral preference or a moral sort of duty outside of humans. You can say it comes from God, but God gives it to humans, right? And so there's no like way of getting around the idea of it being outside of humans. So the better terminology when it comes to discussing this is actually moral realism. Is morality real or is it not real? Is it ontological or not? And that's definitely the better, more precise terminology to this. But yeah, we'll get back to it.
Can now take some examples and determine whether or not they fall within the moral sphere. Now, in order to help us with this, I've drawn a very high quality table which has 4 sections. I don't know how well you can see this, but I've split it between conscious acts, unconscious acts, things that affect well-being, and things that don't affect well-being. As you can see, an action has to be both conscious and affect well-being to fall within the moral sphere, and I'll explain why. And I'm sorry that I have to spell this out, but there is a reason for it, so just bear with me. If an action does not affect well-being, then as we've already determined that morality is based upon well-being, it doesn't fall within the moral sphere, and can't be judged accordingly. For example, if I decide to lift my hand, that's a conscious act, but it doesn't have any effect on well-being, and therefore doesn't fall within the moral sphere. You can't judge me for doing it. Likewise, if I were to roll over in my sleep, that's an unconscious act, but it also doesn't have any effect on well-being, and so I definitely can't be morally judged for it. So now we can consider acts that do affect well-being. So take the following example. If I were to sleepwalk one night and knock over a glass of water in the kitchen before returning to bed, and do so completely unconsciously, and the next day somebody slipped on the water and died, I've committed an act that affects well-being. However, I wouldn't be held morally accountable because I didn't consciously do it. And you can see that that means it doesn't fall within the moral sphere. On the other hand, if I intentionally trip someone up, causing them injury, then I've done something that definitely affects well-being, and I've done so consciously. That means it falls within the moral sphere. Ding, 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 I can be held morally accountable. So an act must be conscious, not by chance, not by accident, and must affect well-being, be it a positive or a negative effect, to be considered either moral or immoral. If these conditions are not met, the action is amoral and no rational person can judge a person for committing it. To do so is to fly in the face of rationality. It would be like holding a volcano morally accountable for erupting. So now we can...
I think one thing I would stress about this is the conscious versus unconscious is an interesting idea, because I don't think that's quite what we think about when it comes to morality. I think the better way is it according to a person's wants or not according to their wants, right? So let's say I was walking down the street and I tripped, and in tripping, I knocked someone else over and they injured themselves, right? That affects well-being. And that's also a conscious thing. I'm conscious in the act of tripping and knocking them over. But the thing that is not, that would make it so that I'm not really responsible for that is the fact that I didn't want to do that. You know, my desire wasn't to trip them up and injure them. I accidentally tripped and knocked the person over and they were injured. And so because it's not quite conscious versus unconscious, maybe that's part of it, but I think it's more, is it in accordance with the person's desire or their intent, right? That's the better way of understanding this, right? Is intent. What was the person's desire? That's especially when it comes to law. That's how we do things in accordance with the law. So that's one critique I'd have right there.
Apply all of this to homosexuality. Firstly, does homosexuality affect well-being? Well, of course, we can talk all day about the benefits and detriments of gay parentage or the inclusion of homosexuality in sexual education, but these are separate issues from simply being a homosexual, and gay marriage for that matter too. Both of these things do not affect anybody else and therefore do not fall within the moral sphere. So in theory, we could conclude here. But for the benefit of those still unconvinced, let's check homosexuality against our other moral criteria. So, secondly, is homosexuality a conscious choice? Now, there is a debate about this. It's a fatuous debate, however, and we can largely dismiss it. The problem with the debate is that it's usually framed in the following way. Either homosexuality is natural and determined by birth, or it's instilled in a person by their environment and upbringing. But think about it for a moment and you'll realize that even if being gay is determined by upbringing and environmental factors, it's still not a choice.
This is how unrecognized.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Here's a trait that certainly doesn't come from your genes, but rather from your environment and your upbringing. Still, it's not a choice. And if something is not a choice, then you cannot be held morally accountable for it. But don't take my word for it. Take Immanuel Kant's. You may have heard of his ethical idea, ought implies can. What he means by this is that to suggest that somebody ought to do something or be a certain way, there must necessarily be a possibility that they can do so. If they can't, that is, if it's impossible to do something, then you can't say that they ought to do it. That would be like saying to a person of colour that they ought to be white, and, furthermore, like telling a gay person that they ought to be straight. It just doesn't make logical sense. But here's the key point, and this is what explains my statement at the beginning of the video. Having proved that homosexuality does not fall within the moral sphere, there's another claim that we cannot make. We can't say that homosexuality is moral. We can't say that it's a good thing. We can't say that it's beneficial for the exact same reasons that we can't say that it's immoral or detrimental. All we can say is that it's amoral. Morality doesn't even come into it. Homosexuality has nothing to do with right and wrong and is simply an innocent sexual orientation that nobody decides upon. As soon as you start trying to make a link between homosexuality and morality, you've already lost the debate. So the next time that somebody tries to argue to you that homosexuality is immoral, don't engage them by claiming that it's the opposite. Instead, explain to them that they're thinking about it in the wrong way and need to reframe the entire discussion. You could even show them this video, I promise, I really wouldn't mind. If somebody asks you about the morality of homosexuality, respond to them as if they've just asked about the morality of skin colour. Say they were to ask you, but do you really think it's moral to be black? This is a palpably stupid question. Of course it's not moral to be black. It's not immoral to be black. It's something that's out of your control and has absolutely nothing to do with morality. and so is homosexuality. And that means that you have no right to morally judge somebody for their sexual orientation any more than you have the right to judge them for the colour of their skin or the shape of their ears. So no, homosexuality is not moral, but it's not immoral either. And you should still vote yes to marriage equality, and you should still celebrate the invaluable freedom that it represents. I've been Alex O'Connor, or Cosmic Skeptic. You can find me on social media here. I want to thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yeah, I mean, I would largely agree with him, but I can tell probably what some people are going to say in response. Yep, we have the order versus disorder. That's definitely a very good qualification. So in Catholicism, it uses the terms of what is ordered versus what is disordered. So Wanton Disciple here says ordered or disordered desires are definitely amoral according to the Catechism. And so basically the idea of ordered versus disordered desires, right? We don't necessarily have full control over our desires, but through practices, we can alter and change our desires, right? And so when you have a desire that is ordered, it means that it's in accordance with how you were created, the created order. And then if it's something that is disordered, then it's not in alliance with what is ordered, right? Now, I think the main thing that Alex has to establish in this argument is the idea that homosexuality is ordered, right? It is something that is naturally a natural good desire. Now, he has a different video out there earlier that talks about the idea of homosexuality in nature and in animals particularly. And we see that other animals practice homosexuality. In fact, there's like leaders of like in lions, the leader of the lion pride, generally the male, they practice homosexuality more in a bisexual way, right? They will have, relations with both males and females, but it is the male lions of highest status that will have sort of relations in a homosexual way. And so it's interesting. We see that from a biological standpoint, it is sort of there. Now, the question then is, do we know biologically what is causing someone's orientation to be of same-sex attraction? And that's a very complicated question. We think it has to do with the X chromosome because it's generally... it seems to be the case, a very strong correlation between homosexuality on the mother's side and the children receiving it. So if there's homosexuality on the father's side, it's not as likely that the children are going to receive it. But the X chromosome comes from the mother. And so in men and in women, if the X chromosome is passed on from the mother, we start to see sort of physiological changes orienting someone toward being more likely to be homosexual, right? And so we can't say that this is wholeheartedly the case, right? Because there's so many different factors. It's not just one gene in the genome that causes this to happen. We can pinpoint it to the X chromosome. We can see different things that come from it. So for instance, the amygdala in men who are homosexual is a lot smaller and a lot closer in size to the amygdala of women for people who are homosexual. This is a physiological thing we can observe and we can tell. And it's not just in humans, it's also the case in other animals. So it's definitely a biological thing. Now, the question is it nature or nurture? I think it's both. It's both nature and it's nurture. So then it comes to the idea of, okay, in my opinion, he said conscious versus unconscious. I think the better explanation is whether it is by the person's choice or desire, right? Is it according to their desire? If it's not according to something they can choose or have control over said desire, then I think we can't quite say that it's moral or immoral. But in that sense, it would be amoral. Minsuk says, so does that mean homosexuality could be part of genetics? This thing has been lots of debated. So yeah, it's been debated scientifically. That's true. There's a lot of debate here. Murney, thank you. Thank you for the message about the setup. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, so it's definitely debated, right? And there is a genetic sort of correlation. We can't quite say that it's a causation thing, but we see a lot of genetic correlations. There's over 1,000 genetic correlations within the X chromosome that show that align with homosexuality. They're marked by these things called markers. So when we look at specific areas, they don't really seem to have any specific sort of aspect into like programming something genetically, but they are present there, and they're correlated to someone's sexual orientation being homosexual. The Morning Sun says, but when truth contradicts tradition or tradition contradicts truth, question mark. Yes, that is a very good question. This gets to why I titled my channel Truth and Tradition. So for those who are here, my channel is Truth and Tradition. And the reason I am Truth and Tradition is because I don't think we can ultimately know truth. You know, I don't think we can find the ultimate truth to reality. I'm very skeptical of that. But we have traditions, and we have a process of so many different ways to figure out things that are true. And I also think that traditions have truth to them. And so it's not necessarily this idea of like, we need to figure out what's true and separate that from the tradition. I think that's a false notion. I think as humans, we aren't oriented to understand reality as it truly is, like ultimate reality. You know, like we perceive light rays and they show us things, but they show us things that aren't like true, like actually how they are. They're a perception of what is. So if I were to compare my eyes to the eyes of like an ant, they'd be so different, right? And that's because my biology is built to perceive the world in a certain way, whereas an ant is built to perceive the world in a totally different way. And so I can't say that my perception as a human is more valid or more true than an ant's perception, right? Because we're both perceiving the same thing, but it's different. They're different perceptions, but they're both true in the subjective sense. And so the question then becomes, what is true? Well, it's hard to figure that out because we have a subjective experience. Wonton said, just call it a mystery and we good. Yes. And clean stash. Thank you. Thank you. You know, I've always struggled with facial hair, so appreciate that. Mern says, dang, and clean layout. Yeah, appreciate it. So, but yeah, when it comes to homosexuality, it's definitely a complicated issue. So much nuance here. And I would definitely recommend you guys to look into the subject some more because my main issue with this video is it basically it's not quite using the right terminology. Conscious versus unconscious, like you can be conscious, but you can still also not be like fully in control. Or it might be a conscious thing that happens to you or you are a part of, but it's not like you have the full context, you know. That's why we have different layers of like murder, you know, like manslaughter is totally different than like first degree and second degree murder. So it's not about consciousness. I think it's more about intent. Do we have the intent to do what we're doing? Theology of the body review next. I don't know what that is. What's the theology of the body? I'm curious. Wonton, bro, you've maybe there's something I'm missing here. Interesting. All right. Well, that is our the second video of this process. Oh, we need to leave a comment.
My name was.
We'll go down here. So let me know, what should we comment? Should we comment something maybe more funny or more kind, or should we try and tear them apart? You know, I just like. I'm a very I'm not very like mean as a person. I don't know if you can tell, but I like kind of joking around about being super mean to people. So Pope John Paul II teaching on morality of sexuality. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah, I'm not quite as theologically schooled in the topic of homosexuality. I had Cade on my podcast. Cade Bradley. Oh my gosh, almost forgot his last name. And he talked a lot about that aspect of things. I can talk about some parts of the Bible, but I'm not as schooled when it comes to like the catechism. So I'd be definitely interested to see what Cade has to say when it comes to theology of the body. Definitely very interesting. So, but for this comment, here's my little handy dandy template. So I just put this at the beginning of every single comment. There's a lot of people here who are kind of newer. So at the beginning of this video, I did some numbers. Alex has 367 videos. It would take approximately 10 days, 21 hours, 22 minutes, and 24 seconds in order for me to, like if I watched it straight up, in order for me to get through all the content. It's approximately 261 hours long. So by estimation from when I started, it would be about 333 hours of content, assuming that he adds 47 hours of content every 6 months. So that's 7 hours of content to watch every single week in order to watch every single video of Alex O'Connor in a year. So for those who might have missed that part, that is what we're up against. That is what you guys get to be a part of in this process. So I'm glad you guys are here. All right. I'm thinking we say something along the lines of the conscious versus unconscious. That just wasn't really making sense to me. If you guys have something to add, do it, Marathon. Yeah, maybe that's what I got to do. That's funny. I don't think I will. I have a job. I have a life. And I like sleep. Sleeping's good. You guys should, honestly, everyone should get more sleep. Tap the video. Give it a heart for more sleep. All right. So I'm thinking something along the lines of about the conscious versus unconscious. That didn't quite add up. And comment if you want to add something to this comment. If there's something you are like, oh, you need to address this, like, let me know. Yeah, I think there's a problem in viewing morality in terms of you're probably going to notice throughout this series too, I'm so bad at spelling. I had a reading disability growing up, so it's a struggle, bro. It's a struggle. All right, I can be consciously aware of something I do without All right. Here's what I got. Let me know if I need to change anything at all. I think there is a problem in viewing morality in terms of consciousness and unconsciousness. I think it has more to do with intent. I can be consciously aware of something I do without having an intent to do said moral act. Example, I could trip and knock someone over. I'm not morally responsible, but still consciously aware. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Okay, Wonton says, this is why I like Aquinas more than Kant. Yeah, no, that's fair. I still like Kant. Kant's definitely a legend. The ought can analogy, I think, is definitely important. It's definitely part of the thing, because like if there's something you can't do, like physically, like say you have to build, a skyscraper, and you just don't have any materials to build a skyscraper. That's not morally wrong for you to not do it, right? This is a bad example. That's such a bad example, but you get what I mean. I think it is definitely a part of the process, but I don't think it's the entire thing. So fair assessment, though. All right, I'm going to leave that one. Let's get on to the next video. I don't remember what's next. Do you guys know? Do you know what's next? Let's see. All right, so what we have next. He also mentioned the idea of like free will with not free will, objective morality. He debated that with rationality rules, and that was a pretty interesting debate. But again, I don't think morality is really a thing between objectivity versus subjectivity. It's more to do with realism versus non-realism, or cognitism versus uncognitive. All right, so who here knows who genetically modified skeptic is? Drew of genetically modified skeptic. That's this guy right here. This guy in the thumbnail. So he's another big atheist sort of YouTuber. So it'll be interesting. These two are going to do a video together, a collab. All right, here we go. Ads are so fun. Here we go.
My name is Alex, and I spend a lot of time on this channel discussing the existence of God rather than the political consequences of belief in one, for reasons I've detailed in the past. Today, however, I'd like to address a more pragmatic argument. That is, the view that religion, whether real or not, offers some real utility and usefulness to its adherents. This is the idea that even if it is all just wishful thinking, religion still offers much benefit to people and should be respected for this reason. You'll have heard this debate before. It's more in the realm of the politician than the philosopher, and is probably the most emotive topic of the entire God debate. Now, to tackle this, I've enlisted the help of a brilliant fellow YouTuber who you should all immediately subscribe to. He goes by Genetic...
Brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. I just love the English accent. Brilliant. I just had to pause. Sorry. It's so good. I love English accents. So good.
Modified skeptic, and you'll be hearing from him shortly. And a sister video to this one is on his own channel, in which I continue my part of the discussion. Even if you lose interest in this particular topic, you simply must go and look at his content. So let's not waste any time here. Let's get into this. Consider, if you will, the fact that some form of religious belief demonstrably permeates effectively all cultures in all places at all times. It's also not a new phenomenon. People have worshipped rocks and animals and spirits and stars since before records began. And what does this all suggest? Well, for religious belief to survive and prosper in such a manner, it seems only logical to suggest that it must have some kind of evolutionary benefit. If it didn't, or was harmful in some way, how could we possibly explain its prominence? Here we have the first argument I want to cover, the argument for evolutionary utility. Basically, that religion must have been useful to us and served such an important purpose that we couldn't dispense of it or do without it, or else it wouldn't have survived the evolutionary lottery. How can we reconcile religion being beneficial, perhaps even necessary, to human evolutionary survival, with the belief that it's harmful in some way and a detriment to society, as many critics of religion maintain? And why on earth would we suggest removing something that has so significantly affected the evolution of man? Well, here's the thing. Before looking for answers, we should consider that we might actually be asking the wrong question. Remember, evolution is a complex process and things aren't always as they seem. Religion itself, in fact, is a massively complicated social phenomenon, and so to simply ascribe it evolutionary advantages may be a little short-sighted of us. There is a very plausible possibility that religion, rather than being a product of evolution, is what Richard Dawkins has called a byproduct of evolution. That is to say, religion could be a manifestation of a very different evolutionary trait. I'll relay Dawkins' own example to you. Have you ever seen a moth commit suicide? It happens all the time. Moths will seemingly intentionally and completely of their own accord fly into candle flames and burn to death. Now, of course, this isn't exactly beneficial behavior, and yet there seems to be some evolutionarily built-in tendency for them to do this. What's going on here? Well, Dawkins has suggested that this is an example of an evolutionary byproduct. Moths use light sources to navigate. To ensure they're travelling in a straight line, they'll keep the sun or the moon at a constant angle in their vision whilst flying. And because these light sources are so far away, they stay at the same angle. And moths didn't evolve in a world with artificial light and candles. If they try to use a near flame to navigate in the same way, it will rapidly change angle, causing the poor thing to circle the flame until it reaches the centre and burns alive. This is an evolutionarily beneficial trait within moths, causing a rather unfortunate side effect. We could ask then, what is the evolutionary benefit of moth suicide? But of course, this is the wrong question. The real question to ask is, what is the separate underlying evolutionary trait that is causing this bizarre and detrimental behavior? In the same way, rather than asking, what is the evolutionary benefit of religion, it may be more sensible to look for what could be causing religion as itself a bizarre and detrimental side effect of society. It may just be that religion is evolutionarily harmful, but a worthwhile sacrifice for whatever underlying beneficial trait is causing it to occur. But with that noted and out of the way, I would maintain that even if religion was explicitly beneficial to the evolution of humanity and not just a side effect, it wouldn't matter. This doesn't mean that it's useful to us today. The theory of evolution is a way to describe events that occurred to bring about the variety of life on Earth. It's not prescriptive. In other words, it tells us how we got here, not how we should conduct ourselves today. This would be social Darwinism, which commits David Hume's is-ought fallacy. The key thing to note here is that just because something is natural doesn't make it right. And even if it helped us in the past, it doesn't mean that it would help us now. For example, rape is an extremely natural act and very likely played a large help in our evolution. But we can all recognize that this doesn't mean that we should be doing it today. In fact, we positively abhor it. Daniel Dennett, in an interview once, gave the example of the sweet tooth. It's easy to see why humanity has evolved to enjoy sweet things, but thanks to the oversaturation of modern food with copious amounts of sugar, it's actually quite a harmful trait to have. Think about it. Having a sweet tooth in the past undoubtedly helped our evolutionary ancestors. However, not only is it now not needed, it's actually harmful and causes obesity and diabetes, among other problems.
That right there is actually a very good point, because when it comes to like sweets, those are like sugars are a building block of life. You know, we talk about like cutting out sugar, you know, but if you actually cut out sugar entirely, that would be really bad for you, right? We need sugar. It's a building block of life, you know, and so the idea is we don't want it in excess. We don't want too much sugar, and that's what we're getting in this culture. Like we have a culture that sort of propagates a lot of sugary food. We put sugar in pretty much everything, and so that's the problem. The problem isn't sugar, right? We're adapted evolutionarily to need sugar. That's a building block of life. But when it comes to like the idea of our culture, our context, it has oversaturated sugar. And so that's the real issue that's going on in this case.
Still, the genetic basis of the sweet tooth is not going away. Humanity is, it seems, to use the phraseology of Thomas Jefferson, still wearing as a man the coat that fitted as a boy. We may similarly have a genetic tendency towards religion and faith, but in the same way that we now control our diets in spite of our sweet-loving nature, we should really begin to dismiss our supernatural beliefs for much the same reason.
So this actually gets to a very interesting point, though. When we talk about evolutionary theory, there's a few things that don't quite add up. One of the examples, and Dawkins had a video discussing this in depth, but it's the idea of peacocks. Male peacocks have bright feathers, beautiful, bright colored feathers. Now, evolutionarily, that doesn't make any sense, right? Because these feathers would be a detriment, right? They make you stick out. You know, it's not like peacock is a peak predator. Like they're not. They're prey for a lot of different animals. And so why on earth would peacocks have such colorful feathers? And so it's a very interesting idea. Some people point to that and say, oh, well, that's proof that evolution isn't true. I don't know about that. I just think it's proof that there's so much to evolution that we don't fully understand. So many things that we're sort of figuring out through time. So definitely an interesting point there. And to say that is religion, right? That religion sort of has detriments to it, but that it's like an evolutionarily sort of adapted concept. You can say that. That's fair. I mean, I would probably lean in that favor to favor that, but I don't think we have that much evidence for that to be the case. I think that just has to be the case if we're talking about materialism being true. Like if materialism is true, that's the explanation for religion. But is that actually true? Is that actually how things are? There really isn't a lot of evidence to say that that's how things are. Now, one thing I found to be really, really interesting, I was just looking this up. Religion for Breakfast, I think, has a really cool video on this. But basically, there's a part of the brain where religion sort of presides. And there's this video on it. But like, basically, I mean, it presides in a lot of different areas, right? Frontal lobe, inferior, partial lobe, emotional and memory areas, right? Religion has a lot of different areas that it touches, but there's a specific area of the brain that lights up, and it's pretty unique to religion. And so it's a very interesting kind of idea here that, you know, religion is correlated to the brain. Oh my gosh, I just realized I was not even showing this. Here it is. But yeah, we can see that it's part of the frontal lobe. It's part of the inferior partial lobe. I'm going to click on this. Yeah, so if there are two concepts that seem parallel lines that never meet, they would have to be religion and neuroscience, right? Which is another interesting thing. I was looking into the Labette study, which talks about free will. I have a video coming up about free will. And that's also another interesting concept there. The brain sort of precognates things. It's called the readiness potential. So the readiness potential lights up in the brain before a movement happens. There's a lot of issues with concluding this means no free will because the experiments had to do with sort of minute sort of movements, not actual things. But in one episode of the... Oh, wait, that's not it. Yeah, so meditation studies, on the other hand, are a little more streamlined and are also helped by the fact that meditation is simpler and more experimental, conducted than prayer. Studies on people practicing transcendental meditation every day have shown that they have lower levels of hormones associated with stress, such as cortisol. I forget where in the brain it is, but Religion for Breakfast has a good video discussing the religious part of the brain. So it's definitely an interesting concept that there's a specific area of the brain that deals with religion. I support Religion for Breakfast on Patreon and have for years. Hey, nice. Way to go, Riley. That's awesome. Yeah, he's such a legend. I love Religion for Breakfast. He really treats the topic super well. And he tackles so many conflicting voices and puts it into a video that makes sense for a public audience. Like, that's insane. That's so hard to do. So huge shout out to him. Yeah. But yeah, when it comes to religion and the brain, they definitely are very much so connected.
I've heard it said that religion is like a shoe insole. One might be needed for some duration of time to help shape a foot properly, but once it's served its purpose, it should be removed, and in fact, if it isn't removed, can deform the foot. Given what we now understand about science and the universe, religion is deforming us in this way. The point I'm trying to make is that yes, religion may have served us some evolutionary utility in the past, but that doesn't mean it serves any social or individual utility today. The insole has served its purpose. The foot of humanity can walk on its own without the support of faith and superstition.
I highly disagree with that. I think religion still plays a very massive, important role. Functionality, like utility-wise, I think religion's very important. When we think about Eastern religions in particular, we see something like mindfulness. Practicing mindfulness is extremely healthy and beneficial for the brain. Having like prayer is another thing that can be beneficial. There aren't as many studies kind of linking that, but this idea of like meditation, practicing mindfulness, these are very important aspects of religion, especially in Buddhism and in Hinduism. And we see that there's a major link between brain health, like physiological health, and practicing these things. So I would disagree. He's probably just talking about Christianity because that's what or Catholicism even, because that seems to be what he's familiar with at this point. But I would highly disagree. I think there's still a lot of utility. I mean, religion gets people into communities. It gets people together. Like that's extremely important for people's health and well-being. So definitely would disagree with that.
And once the insole is removed entirely, it may even be able to run. However, this is but one of many arguments for the utility of religion, and to help me discuss a few more, here's a criminally undersubscribed YouTube channel on whose own channel you'll find the second half of my contribution to this topic.
It's a crime. Go subscribe to Genetically Modified Skeptic.
A link is in the description. So, I'll leave you in the hands of Genetically Modified Skeptic.
Thanks for having me on your channel, Alex. In further consideration of how and if religion benefits humanity, let's take a look at a few claims regarding the utility of religion. It's been proposed that regardless of whether or not the supernatural elements of any religion are true, religion is still beneficial, or even necessary, as it has served well as a tool with which to construct more cohesive communities, thereby benefiting our collective well-being as a social species. Additionally, it's pointed out that religion provides community even today, which is necessary for the health of any one individual and prosperity of any one society. First off, I have no qualms about recognizing that religion has in fact united countless groups of people throughout history. Perhaps it's even benefited humanity in that way. However, it seems that however many groups have been united by religion, just as many have warred against other groups who have been united by a slightly different religion. I'm unsure whether religious groups have historically more often devolved into exclusionary tribalistic communities or have just been co-opted by such communities, which gain their dysfunction by secular means. Either way, it's undeniable that some, if not most, of the most aggressively pernicious tribalistic groups in history, as well as in recent memory, were religiously united and motivated. As for the large number of religious communities which do not behave this way, I definitely acknowledge that they do meet a basic need in providing social support for millions, but I don't know that they provide anything which cannot be found outside of religion. If we take a look at the World Happiness Report's most recent data, it's apparent that less religious countries can attribute their
Okay, so what is this saying? 7.53. I might pull this up. World Happiness Report 2017. I'm going to play it. I'm going to pull this up so I can understand what he's saying here.
World Happiness Report's most recent data, it's apparent that less religious countries can attribute their happiness to social support just as often as moderately religious countries like the US and very religious countries like the UAE. When religion shows no advantage over secular sources in providing social support through community, but still carries the baggage of dogma which easily lends itself to the development of pernicious tribalism, it ceases to be beneficial to humanity and only serves as a hindrance. Another argument for religion's utility is that it has contributed towards societal and even governmental structure for millennia and does so even today. This assertion is verifiably true. Whether that's entirely a good thing, however, is certainly up for debate. I'll readily make the concession that religion may have benefited humanity by creating societal structure on several occasions. Although, just as I did with the last point, I must point out that religion has likely contributed to the destruction of a similar number of societal and governmental systems as it helped create. I'm speaking, of course, of instances of near total annihilation of other societies like those carried out by Christian crusaders and Islamic jihadists, but also of the instances where the influence of religion has made society to regress so that its government enacts laws which strip away human rights. Examples of this include the tyrannical rule of the Catholic Church in medieval Europe, which called for the death of heretics, the previous adoption of the caste system in India, which enforced adherence to assigned societal roles, and of course, to the legislation of Sharia in a multitude of countries even today. The recognition of the self-destructive and oppressive tendencies of theocracy is precisely what motivated the creation of secular democracy as we now experience it. Yes, that means that current Western society was not inspired by the Ten Commandments, but in fact was established in spite of them. The relative stability and resistance to corruption that our governments possess now, as compared to those of a few hundred years ago, is a direct result of the intentional exclusion of religion in government. This may be one of the best examples of Alex's previous point. Maybe humanity did need religion to progress in the past, but today we're faced with the reality that we no longer depend on it for progress, and even experience it as an impediment to progress more than anything. Perhaps if we stop thinking that we need our old crutch, we'll realize that humanity now has the ability to stand up on its own, taller than ever before.
If you want to see more of Genetically Modified Skeptic, which
That was I don't know. So in the chat, Wonton says, but even the atheists celebrate Christian traditions like confirmation. I don't know what you mean by that. How do atheists celebrate confirmation? Because confirmation's within the church, like being confirmed as a Christian. I don't know what you mean by that, but I still don't fully agree. I think this deals mostly with westernized sort of religion. But in terms of like Eastern traditions, we definitely see a link between meditation, mindfulness. Intelligibility isn't possible without theism. They celebrate it outside the church, strangely enough. Okay. Intelligibility isn't possible without theism. Yeah, I mean, you can get a sort of subjective intelligibility, but it wouldn't be like built into the ontology of the world. And that's fair. With a sort of materialistic, deterministic perspective, where everything is based on prior causes, the result is going to be a world where we can't really validate anything logically, right? We can't make sense of anything logically. And in terms of intelligibility, like we would maybe point to science and we'd say like a lightning bolt used to be unintelligible. We describe it to the god Zeus, but then we sort of studied lightning and then we understood that it was scientifically bounded. But just because it's scientifically bounded does not mean that it isn't divinely given, right? That's definitely something that I think people ignore, is the idea that just because we can explain it scientifically doesn't explain the why. Why did it happen this way? You know, why is the world ordered as it is? You know, Alex O'Connor uses a example of iambic pentameter, which is kind of the rhythm behind Shakespeare's writing. So when Shakespeare writes, he writes in sort of this rhythmic way of iambic pentameter. And we can study sort of that and we can figure out, okay, this is the type of things that we can find behind the sort of like knowledgeable, like interesting things behind Shakespeare's writing, right? This is what it is. But when we press that question further and further, we end up with, well, that's just how it is, like iambic pentameter. But it doesn't explain like, okay, but how did that happen? You know, like there has to be some sort of intention or mindset to it. At least that seems to be the case. Why is it not intelligible without theism? Just got on. So sorry if you answered that already. Yeah, I mean, that was Wonton's point. Intelligibility is an assumption that cannot be proven, but is essential for the scientific method. Yeah, so basically we have to assume a lot of things about reality in order for the scientific method to happen, right? So I have to assume that the world exists. I have to assume that that I can use logic in order to come to conclusions. Now, in materialism, everything is based on survivability. So if I am programmed through evolution to favor what helps me survive and reproduce, and not to favor things that are going to bring out truth, if that's the case, then we have a problem, because we can't then say that like the logical conclusion that 2 + 2 = 4, that basic idea that seems to be just true, we can't say that that is founded or valid, because in order to say that it's valid, we have to say that logic itself is not based on merely survivability and preference to survive, but it's actually based on ontological truth. So basically, if I say I'm like in the fields of Africa, I'm a nomadic sort of early person, and I see rustling in a bush, right? I see that there's something rustling in a bush. Now, the human that's going to survive this encounter and reproduce evolutionarily is the one that favors just running away. Even if it's, say, their friend that's in the bush that's making it rustle, it doesn't matter. If they have the reaction of, I gotta run, and interpreting that as dangerous, then that is going to be the thing that's favored evolutionarily. And so they're going to reproduce, and that's what's going to ultimately come out. And so it's not about who's actually causing the rustling. It's about running from what is causing the rustling. And so we can then use that sort of idea to show, okay, logic itself is not based on ontological reality and us having a sort of proclivity to figuring out what is actually true about ultimate reality. It's actually based on survivability in evolution. And so that's how the scientific method, logic, all these sort of foundational things that we just say are true, that's how that can be undermined by the ontological argument of it. So basically what's going on is the epistemology, how we understand what is true. The epistemology, our knowledge claims, is undermined. Our ability to know things is undermined by the ontology of evolution. What is? So what is undermines our ability to know anything is basically the idea there. I hope that wasn't too much information at once, but I would definitely, I mean, this doesn't critique it, right? This doesn't prove that determinism, that materialism's wrong. This doesn't prove that. What it does is it shows an issue, an underlying issue with what materialism causes. And so that's kind of the idea there. Okay. Yeah. It's definitely an interesting topic. There's a lot to discuss there, but I'm gonna keep going with the video. What were your guys' main thoughts on this? So the video was, real or not, is religion actually useful? And they're claiming that religion is no longer useful. It's no longer a utility for society. Now, I think I don't know if we can say that. He brought up the study of people who were sort of outside of in like sort of Western European countries, Scandinavian countries, where they're more atheistic. That sort of well-being from those societies might be evidence that we don't need religion anymore. I don't think we can say that because those societies were built. They were foundationally established by Western religion and valuing things like freedom, valuing voting, things of that sort. So it's definitely an interesting discussion. What do we got here? Cause and effect are the assumption, but you can certainly make that claim. Okay, Mighty Sarlacc says, I would say transcendent is necessary is also an assumption. Yeah, I mean, you can say that too, right? Saying that there's a God is an assumption as well. So they're both laying out on assumptions. The interesting thing about this critique is that it sort of attacks an axiom being like, this has to be true in order for us to actually have a conversation. And so if it attacks this axiom, then there can't really be a conversation, because now we can't use logic. We can't validate logic, so there can't be any sort of conversation. So that's what I mean by it doesn't disprove materialism or determinism. All it does is it shows an underlying issue with accepting materialism or determinism. Yeah. I mean, we do have to assume it in a sense. But all right. So real or not real, is religion useful? Well, since it had, genetically modified skeptic, my man, I think we got to give it some brownie points. I think we got to be nice. We could let loose on them, but I think we'd be nice here. Plus, they brought in some nice, some research, some good research going on. All right, I'm going to copy my handy dandy little comment template. All right, let me know. What kind of comment should I leave? Should I leave a funny comment? Should I leave a nice comment? Or should I let loose? Rawr. Let loose the lion. Rawr. All right. The poll is out. What kind of comment should we leave? Yeah. No, that's what Mighty said, right? All the presuppositions are assumptions, but we have to agree on the assumption to move forward. Otherwise, we're attacking axioms. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely an interesting point that I think is important to stress in that sort of conversation. I still think it's a valid thing to bring up, though. Like, I do think it's a valid critique to bring up, because it is a aspect of materialism and evolution, whereas it's not an aspect of libertarian free will. It's not something that comes from that. Let loose the lion. All right, if you guys want me to let loose the lion, come on, you got to vote it. No one's voting funny. Do you guys think I'm not funny? I mean, I'm not a comedian. I could learn some about comedy. But I'd love for you guys to help with this. It's looking like you guys want to be nice again. All right. I'll be nice. I guess I'll be nice. You guys are way too kind and charitable. I'm gonna give it a minute. We'll see if someone comes in and is like, let loose the lion, because we got one vote there. So what kind of comment do you want to leave? Do you want to leave a funny comment? Do you want to leave a nice comment? We could talk about their t-shirt. We could talk about their background, right? The guy had a dead daredevil, poster in the back. So maybe we comment on that. All right, Jared says, I was thinking a funny comment. Jared, you got to vote. You got to vote. Put it in there. Your vote matters. Guys, this is America. Listen up, listen up. I'm going to look at the camera. Your vote matters. Democracy. I mean, it does. I'm not making fun of that idea. It's actually great. Oh, okay. You just put nice instead. All right. I think I'm going to end the poll. We're going to leave a nice comment. You guys are too nice. You guys are so kind. I built too nice of a community here. I appreciate you guys. All right. What should we comment on? Let's look up here. He's got a little shark. He made that, or a friend of his made this little subscriber button. I'm thinking we do the Daredevil poster. Right? Thoughts? Daredevil poster? Give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up if we're doing it. If we're locked in on the Daredevil poster. Comment. All right. I put sick Daredevil poster in the back. I'm going to do a little rock sign too. Rock on. Boom. All right, we sending it? I'm going to send it. Speak now, forever hold your peace. In 5, 4, 3, 2. It's like iCarly. All right, we're sending it. Boom. The Daredevil poster. One out. All righty, our next video. What do we got next? What do you guys think is next? What kind of video do we have next? Let's see. So for those who maybe saw the thumbnail and you're like, why is he not talking about homosexuality? We did watch that video. It was this one here. Homosexuality is not moral, and here's why. And he's not saying that it's immoral. He's just saying that morality has nothing to do with homosexuality. So it's an interesting case. Definitely an interesting case. I like it. But let's keep going. Our next one is progressive dogmatism. Drawing Muhammad equals Holocaust denial. That's a pretty wild statement. Drawing Muhammad, depictions of Muhammad, is the same as Holocaust denial. That's quite the statement. Let's see what he has. Let's see what he's got.
Everybody, my name is Alex, and before we begin, I'd like to remind you that if you're in or around the English city of Durham next week, I'll be speaking on the 23rd of November. A link is in the description. That's Durham in the UK, by the way, not Durham in North Carolina, as I know I confused a few of you on Twitter. My apologies for that. It would be wonderful to meet as many of you as possible at the event if you can make it, and there should be a chance to go for a drink afterwards if you stay until the end of the talk. Now, since we're speaking on such matters, I would say that I don't know why you wouldn't stay until the end of the talk. However, I can't say that I'm exactly a stranger to early departures from speeches, as this is precisely what I and my companions did not so long ago during a dizzyingly pretentious talk by the radical neo-Marxist superstar Mr. Slavoj Zizek. The talk was certainly interesting, but not for reasons academic. Mr. Zizek really is a one-of-a-kind speaker, but then perhaps there's a reason for this. Now, recently
Interesting. I don't know what he's referring to there, but let me know if you guys know what he's referring to there. Sounds like an interesting speech. I wonder if it's on YouTube.
came across him again in a short video clip entitled Slavoj Zizek on New Atheism. I was pretty certain that I could predict what he'd have to say about the so-called New Atheists, but I decided to watch it anyway and was simply astonished at the content of one of his characteristic tangents. Detouring to speak briefly on the Charlie Hebdo massacre of 2015, he casually strolls through a horrifying negation of freedom of expression that seems to lean its sympathy more towards those offended by the drawings of the Prophet Muhammad than those who were slaughtered by a group of his deranged and psychopathic devotees. You'll see what I'm talking about shortly. Let's play the video.
I hate all those liberal, centrist,
Guys, how meta is this? We are reacting to a video, and you guys are reacting to me, reacting to a video, which is reacting to a video. That's pretty meta. That's insane.
Which are now fashionable in the United States. Let's name them. Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, and so on. You know why? First, they are not really neutral. I strategically agree with them when they criticize some type of radical left for you are allowed to mock everyone except Islam. Like, we should be tender there. You are immediately accused of Islamophobia.
Now, you'll want to remember this point. Zizek is making no distinction between religions in their deservedness of criticism and ridicule. Now, this is quite an obvious and almost boring disclaimer at this point, but it's relevant for what's to come.
I agree with this. I absolutely think we should be ruthless also towards Islam. But the problem I have is that then let's be ruthless towards everyone.
A fine point indeed, it seems. We should be ruthless in criticizing bad ideas, and this is because holding back to protect sensitivities is foolish and harmful to the progression of civilization, right?
You know my problem with you remember that Charlie Hebdo murders, you know?
Well, I certainly know what my problem was. The idea that somebody should be even hurt or imprisoned, let alone murdered for the crime of drawing a picture, even if it's the most tasteless, offensive, and unfunny drawing that ever was, is more than obscene. It is more than a scandal. It's the most egregious offense imaginable against the most valuable freedom we have, that of expression. And almost any other factor at play, especially hurt sensitivities, is practically irrelevant. I should hope that any person who speaks, not in terms of one problem or a certain problem, but as you said, my problem with the Charlie Hebdo attack, as in the most important problem that immediately springs to mind, would share in my outrage and identify the innocent loss of life as the problem. Mr. Zizek, however, seems to have something else in mind.
I always explode when I hear the story, oh my God, how open we are in Europe. You see, it's our spirit that you can make fun of everything.
That's an interesting choice of wording. I can think of a few other individuals and organizations who also, quote, blow up when they hear of this freedom experience.
Yeah. Oh, burn. What a take. Wow. That was crazy. That was crazy. So I wasn't sure what he was referring to in this video, the Charlie Hebdo shooting. And what he's referring to here, just for context so that you guys are aware, here's a little Wikipedia on it. On January 7th, 2015, at about 11 a.m. in Paris, France, the employees of the French satirical weekly magazine Charlie Hebdo were targeted in a terrorist shooting by two French-born Algerian Muslim brothers. So I think I remember this happening. I didn't remember that it was what it was called, the Charlie Hebdo shooting, but it's basically equated to sort of the 9/11 of France, or of Europe even, just at large. And so the duo murdered 12 people and injured 11 others. So, I mean, it's not on the same scale, right, as 9/11, but I mean, this is still a serious issue. And the reason is because it was a sketch artist. It was someone who was making, funny content about Muhammad, and sure, you might be offended about that, but I mean, does that deserve, murdering 12 people and injuring 11 others? So it leaves an interesting question. If this is what Islam teaches that you should do according to the Quran, maybe we have a problem here, right? I don't have a problem with Islam. There are some things in the Quran that are problematic. But I personally don't want to speak too much about it because I just don't know a lot about the Quran. I've read a little bit of it. I've read through pretty much just the Heifer, which is only the second chapter, but it's the longest chapter. But yeah, there's so much to the Quran that I don't know, so I don't want to speak on it. But from what I've heard, there's a lot of bad takes. There's a lot of rough things, and so it's a tragedy to see this. Riley says, I remember when this happened. Yeah, I'm remembering when this happened too. I forgot what it was called, but yeah, the Charlie Hebdo shooting.
experienced in European democracies. Look, you can't just wave your arms and speak quixotically about what is perhaps the most important feature of European Enlightenment philosophy, the idea that no topic is beyond the right of any person to mock and criticize, in order to make it sound like a silly idea. Not only is this not a silly idea, it's one of the greatest ideas ever conceived by some of the bravest individuals in the history books, some of whom gave their lives in its pursuit. And of course, these people, it goes without saying, are worthy of our utmost respect for it.
Those stupid Arabs think some topics Muslims are out, unmentionable, but it's not like this, and I think it's even good that it's not like this.
Well, yes, it is like this. There are people who do think that certain groups, including Muslims, since you named them, should be off the table when it comes to critique or humour, more so than other groups. Furthermore, this is a stupid and bigoted opinion. At least that's my view anyway, so what exactly is wrong with this position in your view, Mr. Zizek?
Every culture has its, how should I call it, unmentionable points.
Only on a social level. There are certain ideas in every culture that society would frown upon if expressed, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be expressed. Of course, you'll pay a social price for doing so, and sometimes more in fact, for instance, if you try to tackle the taboo on criticizing Muhammad in the Middle East. This is an example of one of the unmentionable points you speak of. But this isn't how it should be. And if it is, if there are certain unmentionable topics, then who gets the authority to decide upon them? You? Me? No, nobody gets to decide what I'm allowed to say but myself. I value deeply my own ability to judge the statements I make, and not to predicate them on permissible social convention. If you're going to say that I should have this ability revoked, and dictate that there are certain opinions that I'm not permitted to express, then you better have a damn good reason for it, and you better not be holding your breath.
Like, okay, in Europe you can make fun of Mohammed, but can you make fun of Holocaust?
Yes. I mean, it would be distasteful and offensive to many, but it would be...
Someone's got to clip that. Oh, man. Imagine clipping that. Is it okay to make fun of the Holocaust? Alex O'Connor. Yes. The context matters in that one. Context definitely matters there. So I got... interesting. This gets at kind of the idea of free speech. And I remember I took when I was in journalism, I took a course on like different law when it comes to journalism, and talked about the different aspects of free speech and what is actually unprotected language. So we have different categories of unprotected free speech in America. You can't just say anything. You can within these guidelines. So things like defamation, right? This is kind of something that I feel like we get, or in obscenity. Those are kind of the big ones that people say a lot of the time, like, oh, this is defamation, this is obscenity, right? Defamation is a false statement that can harm someone. So if you say something that's just outright false about a person and it actually harms them, like whether that's in terms of their ability to make money, their standing in society, right? Their access to different goods and services. Defamation is that idea. Like, you can't say something that's just going to totally uproot someone's life, right? Obscenity, that's more to do with like child pornography. Like, that would be an example of obscenity. We can't be propagating this kind of stuff in society. We also have true threats. So if you make a threat and you have access and ability to do said threat, that's a true threat, right? If you say, you text a school and you say, I'm coming with a bomb tomorrow, very dark analogy, but this is a true threat. And that is not protected speech. You will get in trouble for saying something like that, because if you have access to do something like that, then there's a problem there. So we see a lot of different unprotected speech here. And I think it's important to understand that, yes, we should protect speech, even opinions that we don't like. America and Britain and pretty much every Western culture, they all don't protect certain types of speech. So if there's some way in which you were to speak against the Holocaust and were to say it was a good thing or something like that, I would say that that's probably protected speech, but there's probably a way you can spin it in which it underlines and might hurt someone physically. And so if that's the case, then it would be unprotected.
Funny to some others. It's done all the time, in fact, by people like Jimmy Carr. Now, it may be in bad taste, but it's not, quote, unmentionable. And I can certainly say with confidence that Jimmy Carr needn't be watching his back all the time for crazed Jewish murderers. Even outside of comedy, this principle applies even to something as usually grotesque as Holocaust denial. You may think that this is something that's worthy of being unmentionable, and I can understand why, but this is a dangerous idea. Not only does it set a precedent, but also if you tell people that they're not allowed to hear a particular view, then they will start adopting it in droves. Here's Christopher Hitchens.
One of the proudest moments of my life, that's to say, in the recent past, has been defending the British historian David Irving, who is now in prison in Austria for nothing more than the potential of uttering an unwelcome thought on Austrian soil. He didn't actually say anything in Austria. He wasn't even accused of saying anything. He was accused of perhaps planning to say something that violated an Austrian law that says only one version of the history of the Second World War may be taught in our brave little Tyrolean republic. A British historian who's committed no crime except that of thought and writing. And that's a scandal. And I can't find a seconder usually when I propose this, but I don't care. I don't need a seconder. My own opinion is enough for me, and I claim the right to have it defended against any consensus, any majority, anywhere, any place, any time. And anyone who disagrees with this can pick a number, get online, and kiss my ass.
Try to do this, and you will see how you will also be immediately excommunicated. Now, wait a minute. My point is not, so let's allow this also. My point is simply that to prohibit some things ethically is not in itself a bad thing. Now, to provoke you, I will say it's even a sign of progress. I'm from progressive dogmatism.
You know, I have to give credit where credit is due. You're right, Mr. Zizek. You have provoked me. Was it not you who less than 2 minutes ago was pointing out how silly it is that Islam, among other religions, is especially protected from criticism? Was it not you who just said that these ideas should be treated just as, quote, ruthlessly? Why have you changed your tune? You were onto something, that no idea should be beyond criticism and ridicule. You were almost onto it, but you've given in to the idea that you've just rebuked, and said that there are, in fact, unmentionable opinions.
Maybe you know the story, I will repeat it. Would you really like to live in a society where you would have to argue like Habermasians, rational argumentation, why women should not be raped?
Short answer, definitely no. I would not want to live in a society like that. Sorry about the ad, guys. I'm going to get it out here in a second. All right, there we go.
Okay, I see what you're trying to say. Of course, arguing that rape is okay is practically unmentionable in modern Western society, but that's not because the argument is offensive. It's because the argument is illogical. If somebody tried to argue that rape isn't wrong, they wouldn't be met as much with claims of offense as they would with people showing why their argument is ridiculous.
I don't think this is the line of argument that he should be taking here. As I was saying before, we have unprotected speech, right? And if you were propagating the idea that rape is okay, right? That's a terrible idea, right? It's not just illogical. It's wrong from an intuitive sense. And the reason why it's unprotected is because of obscenity, right? It's going, and then there's like, you could say maybe fighting words, true threats, incitement. So it's causing a lot of issues. Depends on what exactly is being said in the context in which it's being saying. But all of these are not protected speech. So we say we have free speech, but there are things where they're not protected under the law. And it's important to recognize that in cases like this, where we're talking about, I'm going to say grape for the sake of YouTube. If we're talking about grape, and saying we should propagate this as a good thing in society, and we should pretend that this is totally not against all of our moral intuitions, that's a crazy idea. But this might very well cause actual physical damage. And so that's when free speech is no longer protected under the law. It's no longer free speech because you are creating a dangerous environment by having this speech. If you're saying something that is going to harm someone physically, that is going to create harm physically to someone, then that's not free speech. So in that case, that's what I would argue. I wouldn't say that it's some sort of illogical. This is just unprotected speech that we're talking about right here.
In fact, if somebody did think that rape was okay, I wouldn't be so stupid as to say, oh, you can't say that, it's offensive and unmentionable, because this will only make the problem worse. I'd show them logically why I think they're wrong, and when I win the argument, your result is achieved. It becomes unmentionable. But not by force, not by imposing restrictions on speech, but by reasoned argument. And this way, rather than forcing people with dangerous or bigoted ideas to go underground and develop covert communities, we can help them to actually change their minds. And this is why, yes, even the most abhorrent ideas you can think of should definitely be argued about so long as someone actually believes in them. I mean, would you rather just go on letting them believe that rape is okay? Of course we should argue this if there are people who actually think that. Of course we should.
No, I would like to live in a society where this is, in a good sense, simply accepted as a self-evidence. So when some guy starts to deploy this tasteless line, you know, oh, but don't you think she secretly enjoyed it and so on, you don't have to argue. The guy simply immediately appears as an idiot.
Yes, those who disagree with him would see him as an idiot, but he'd still hold this horrific opinion. Rather than only presenting rape apologists as idiots and doing nothing more, maybe we should open it to argument, and maybe we should try to convince them to, stop being rape apologists. I think this would be more effective in creating a cohesive society. Don't you?
You know, in this sense, I claim the first thing to accept is that, of course, it's not the same. I'm not saying our taboos are the same as their taboos. I'm just saying the first clear point. Every culture has its taboos.
No, but you are comparing their taboos with our taboos. If you're not, then you're not making a point at all. If that's not what you're doing, then please explain the conclusion that we're supposed to draw from you bringing up the Holocaust in the context of ridiculing Islam. What are you doing if not putting up some defense for this ridiculous Islamic taboo? And the fact that you illustrate why we shouldn't caricature the Prophet Muhammad by saying that, well, we also don't ridicule the Holocaust, so what? Are you really suggesting that drawing a picture of a 7th century prophet is as objectionable as ridiculing the Holocaust? This argumentation is completely and utterly illogical. But I'll say this argument may be illogical, it may be hypocritical, it may even be offensive. But there's one thing it's not, and could never be. It's not unmentionable. I've been Alex O'Connor, or Cosmic Skeptic. You can find me on social media here. I want to thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to see if you can come to the Durham event, and I will see you in the next one.
Yeah, so that was definitely an interesting take. I mean, I mostly agree with Alex. I'm very much so a free speech proponent. I think free speech is very, very necessary for a free society in general. The one thing that I would critique is that there basically for him, it seems as if there's nothing, there's no opinions, there's nothing that you can say that is so wrong that we can't accept it. And I, as I pointed out a few times, there are a few things. And I think it's when you are saying something that is going to directly defame someone, or it's going to cause some sort of obscenity, things of that sort. Those are, legally not protected under the law, and they are types of free speech that I think are reasonably unprotected under the law. Things like libel, libel's another good example of something that is definitely should not be protected under the law. So, while I would agree mostly with what he's saying, I think if he were to look a little bit deeper into the legality of this subject, he would realize, okay, yeah, the reason why we can't say that, propagating grape in the society as something good, if we have speech protected as under free speech as grape is fine, right? If we were going to do something like that, we would not protect it, not because we can sort of argue against it. Of course, that dialogue is probably important to have, but we can just outright say that's wrong. We can outright say we're not going to accept that kind of speech because it's obscene. It's obscene speech that is not protected legally. So I think that's an important distinction that he probably misses from this discussion. So yeah. Now we have to figure out a comment. I think I'll probably target my comment toward something along the lines of what I was saying, like unprotected speech, things that are libel, things that are, obscene, things that are, what I saying here? Defamation. So if it causes like someone to not be able to make money or lose their job or some sort of standing in society because you said something publicly. That's not protected speech. We should have laws in place to not protect that kind of speech. So, yeah, I would agree with that aspect of things. All right. I think that's what I'm just going to comment. If you guys have any sort of ideas or comments that you'd like to leave for Alex here, let me know and I can add it to the comment as well. But I think I'm gonna keep it in accordance with that. So legally, under a free speech nation, there are still some types of speech that are not protected under the law. It is not about arguing against speech that can cause physical harm. I'm so bad at spelling. Libel. E-L, not L-E. Libel and defamation. Okay, what did I say? Legally, under a free speech nation, there are still some types of speech that are not protected under the law. It is not about arguing against speech and that can cause physical harm, but about banning said speech, even in a free society. These would legally be things like defamation, libel, obscenity, etc. There we go. All right, I said legally under a free speech nation, there are still some types of speech that are not protected under the law. It is not about arguing against speech that can cause physical harm, but about banning said speech in a free society. These would legally be things like defamation, libel, obscenity, etc. I agree with most of your points here, though. We should protect caricatures of Muhammad and other faiths / events. As long as said speech will not directly cause physical harm to someone, it should be protected. Yeah. Boom. All right. Well, I think that's probably good enough for now. Hey, there I am. I think that's probably enough for right now. Guys, this was so much fun. You guys make this task, this long, arduous task. Oh, you guys make it possible. Give this video a like. Give this some hearts. It helps it get it seen by other people, even when we're done here. For those who don't know who I am, my name is Jackson. I run a podcast called the Truth and Tradition Podcast, where I interview scholars on the intersection of science, religion, and philosophy. And we just have a lot of fun. We dig into a lot of interesting takes. Currently, this challenge is about watching every single Alex O'Connor video on the internet. That is, and I will stress it again. I've stressed it before. I will stress it again. That is 261 hours of content, approximately. About 10 days, 21 hours, 22 minutes, and 24 seconds of straight content. And we're doing it. We're doing it together. I couldn't do it without you guys. You guys are absolute legends. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. I appreciate you guys being here. Let me know if there's like something that you guys would like to be a part of. If there's like some other ways that you think you might be able to participate in this more beneficially. But overall, this was a really great stream. I really appreciate you guys showing up. I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Have a great night, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, y'all.